Again, Kip, it's great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Cheers, Joe. I'm so happy to be here.
Excellent. So let's get into it. So you got the shows that are coming up with Ron Carter. Talk to me a little bit about the evolution of getting to this point where you're going to be with a legend presenting this music.
Oh man, it's such a treat. I can't even tell you. The story goes back to Ethel, my string quartet. Ethel's cellist, Dorothy Lawson, has been playing in Maestro Carter's Nonette project for quite some time, and they've done, I mean, stuff at the mostly the big clubs in New York, like the Iridium, Blue Note, Birdland, that kind of thing. And Maestro Carter will do like a month-long residency sometimes and bring a few different bands. There'll be the Golden Striker Trio, there'll be the Nonette Project, there'll be um, different projects. And the Nonette Project involves four cellists, believe it or not, and that was led by longtime friend of Maestro Carter's named Kermit Moore, who recently passed away. And that's kind of thrown the Nonette Project into upheaval. I'm not sure what they're going to do the next time around. But so Dorothy and Maestro Carter have been friends for years, and when she floated the idea, wouldn't it be great to do something together? Um, Ron said, "Well, I recorded this album with Kronos Quartet back in 1985 based on the music of Thelonious Monk, and it never got performed live." So it was a West Coast date, and uh, I'm trying to remember. I think it's 9 tracks total, and there was a lot of transcription. There was a lot of arranging by a gentleman. I can go way more into depth about that in a different. I'll stay on topic here, and so that was Maestro Carter's idea. Is let's do this record that I enjoyed doing back in 1985. We never got a chance to perform it live, so why don't we go through the work of getting the charts, getting the music, and finally playing this live. And so that's what we're gonna perform for the first half of the concert. And then we thought, well, as long as we're doing a classical jazz collaboration here, Maestro Carter has a really cool recording of Bach's Brandenburg Concerto Number 3,
Yeah.
where there's a lot of room in that piece. There's a lot of low frequency room in that piece, let's say. And so there are really cool opportunities for Maestro to blow over some of the extended diminished sections, especially in the first movement. There are these long passages where Bach kind of snakes the harmony around, and it starts going into some places that weren't popular between the years of 1785 and 1950,
Yeah.
you know. But then they came back, man. They came back with bop. And those, diminished substitutions over dominant chords, and Maestro's, representing that pretty hardcore,
Yeah.
and bringing a little Kansas City flavor to the Zankel Hall in March. We're super excited, man. It's just a complete treat.
The one thing that jumps out, I mean, obviously, but everything about this, from, doing Monk to having Ron Carter and all of this, is that I keep thinking about March 13th. That was the
Hmm.
day in 2020 where it all came to a close. Live shows
Mm.
ceremoniously came to a halt. And the one thing that's beautiful about seeing this time right now is that everything's back, everything's swinging, live music is happening. Is there anything? How did you make it through that time period? Now that we're kind of talking about that, how did you make
Yeah.
it through?
Uh, I appreciate the question. It's sort of a bittersweet thing to think about now because we went production hardcore. I've got a production background. The other violinist in our quartet, Corin Lee, he's also got a production background, and so we took our residency at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Balcony Bar. Ethel has been in residence there for the last 12 years, and we took that residency online in like month two of. Oh man, that whole situation where nobody was going out to shows and people didn't feel comfortable being next to each other and all this kind of stuff. And man, it was a challenging time. I had a 1 year old at the time. I have a 1 year old again now, but it's not the same 1 year old. And I was enjoying spending a lot of time with him, but there was just no music happening. And so we went production hardcore. We were filming stuff. I was getting sent, video files, and we were mixing together the audio and doing those kind of screen mashup videos that no one wants to have to look at nowadays. And we did that every week for about a year and a half. We reached out to artists. It was an enormous opportunity to collaborate. We reached out to artists that we wouldn't have had. Um, Oh, probably wouldn't have had the time to do that sort of thing previously, like Sharon Nova, My Brightest Diamond, David Krakauer, the world's, preeminent klezmer clarinetist. I mean, I could go on and on. There's a huge list of, Wycliffe Gordon, the trombonist from Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and so many other amazing projects. We had a chance to reach out to a lot of people and, do these video mashups because people were sitting in their home not playing. And anybody who had the production skills and the time to put it all together was kind of, staying busy. And so we did that, and that was cool. The bittersweet part, I would say, is that man, I feel as though people aren't coming out to shows as much as they were before the pandemic. I feel like that period taught us how to enjoy music online. And, I think that stuck with us a little more than I'd like.
Yeah.
Our online presence is still stronger than it used to be. Our video production game is still better than it was before. So there's some good, consequences from that. But I feel as though there's also this long-term effect where it's just not quite as immediate as it
Yeah.
as it used to be. And I feel like the kids that are coming up now experience that disruption, and now this is the new normal and are going to take it from here. And so I think it's kind of up to the younger generation um to rediscover the beauty of live performance and why it is that we see something happen in the moment,
Yep.
as opposed to just consuming media, which, frankly, is not complete. It's not a complete musical experience. It involves the listener in a sort of vague way,
Yep.
but the listener's not nearly as important as when you're right there and you know that the performer is playing what they're playing because you're there.
Yep. Yep. I
Uh,
totally get it. Believe me. So let's go back to the beginnings. Tell me where you were born and raised. How did the violin become your world? How did Ethel? How did this all evolve into who you are today?
oh man, that's cool. Okay, so a bio in like the shortest amount of time possible. Um,
Twitter feed.
well, I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota. My
Okay.
father is an orchestra teacher, retired or high school orchestra teacher. And so, I learned violin from him and from his friends. There was a lot of classical music in the house. I remember, um, my mom really enjoyed like Billy Joel and Three Dog Night and the Beatles. And my father, he got a little bit into like the switched on Bach, if you remember that sort of Wendy Carlos, electronic thing that was happening back in the 70s. But I was born in 80. And so I grew up listening to Paul Simon and Mozart sort of in equal measure.
Yeah.
And I didn't discover jazz until I was in my maybe just like almost high school, like junior high, high school. Um, and it was better. It was better than both. There was a lot of, there was more space, there was more air, there was a reason why people were doing things. There was the moment of decision. And the first I remember Keith Jarrett's trio's album Standards in Norway. I stumbled across that one really early, and it just really opened up my mind. And from there I went to Berklee College of Music and I studied jazz out there with Matt Glaser, who's a wonderful jazz violinist, very much in the Stefan Grappelli tradition. I transcribed a lot of Joe Venuti and Stuff Smith. Eddie South. One time I was visiting Kansas City, I got a chance to take a lesson with Claude Williams.
Oh yeah. Claude Fiddler
Ooh.
Williams.
Claude Fiddler Williams, man, one of the greats.
Yes.
And yeah, his sound was wonderful, man. Even like at that time, he was already an elder, certainly, but and um, man, one thing we did, we started out with our instruments on full volume, and then he was like, "Man, let's put our practice mutes on. I want to be able to talk while we're playing." So we were comping for each other and playing. I think we were playing Donna Lee, and we were talking and having a conversation while we were carrying on the tune and playing. And man, what a beautiful person, beautiful
Yeah.
player.
I,
Um,
I I saw him in the late 90s when I was just getting into jazz myself. I was young. And I went to a Coda jazz benefit, and it was a local Kansas City conglomerate of veteran musicians that were raising money because a lot of these cats that would pass away didn't have money to get buried. it was kind of a dire thing. And I remember him being there, and he stood up. Someone introduced him, and he was well into his 90s. And man, that place blew up like Charlie Parker came out of a spaceship.
Yeah, man.
You know what I'm saying? It was like, all right,
Absolutely.
it was paying homage to the history and that clear bridge that he created between the old cats and the young cats. So it was
And
cool.
man, I mean, he just swings so hard, and I feel like I mean, there's not a lot of people doing that. There've never been a lot of people doing that on the violin
Yeah,
at one given time, you
yeah,
know? And I feel like the ones that really made, kind of paved the way, like Ray Nance, Stuff Smith, like their legends loom so large, man. They still swing harder than, you know, most of us out here.
yeah.
But I really enjoy Jenny Scheinman, if you're familiar with her work. She's got a project with Allison Miller, Jenny Scheinman
Yeah,
and Allison Miller's Parlor Game, and they sound fantastic.
man,
We got Zach Brock and Sarah Caswell and folks like
yeah,
that, and it's a pleasure to listen to them. But the violin's just it's a different thing. It was invented in a different time, and it came up in a different culture, and it's just not as loud. It's very nuanced. The number of ways you can start a note on a violin versus the number of ways you can start a note on a saxophone. Like maybe the saxophone's a bad idea because you can start a note a lot of ways on a saxophone too. But there's just like the bow has so many parts of it, and there's so many different. You can bite the string and start a note. You can brush into your eighth note. You can slur these eighth notes like a saxophonist would breathe. I mean, that sheer amount of possibility and variability, it really puts the violin half into the vocal jazz camp, in my opinion.
yeah,
You're never going to get the kind of harmonic thinking that you get out of Coltrane
yeah,
or, I mean, you could make a really long. It's not a thinker's instrument,
yeah,
It's got this very nuanced emotional quality, and it's very difficult to bring that into a room with bass and drums. And obviously Claude Fiddler Williams had his amazing. He had his strategy, and he was able to create that sound where when he was plugged in, that was his voice.
yeah,
Um, but there are just not so many of us that have been able to do that. And what's cool about the concert coming up with Maestro Carter is that we're playing it as a classical quintet
yeah,
basically.
yeah,
And I think the precedent for that in the jazz world is like in the Jimmy Giuffre 3, which is Jim Hall and Eddie Gomez and Jimmy Giuffre in the late 50s were playing this music without a drummer, and it's very sensitive music, and there was a lot of space, but it swung really hard, even though there was a lot of space in it.
yeah,
And people didn't know what to do with it at the time. And it almost wasn't until like Paul Bley and Steve Swallow and those people kind of, 10, 15 years later, brought a different mentality to it and kind of really exploded it into the avant-garde sense that people were able to draw the line back to Jimmy Giuffre and go, "Oh my gosh, they were doing this amazing stuff back in the 50s
yeah,
that was really chamber music and improvisation, overlapped."
yeah, for sure.
Um,
It's interesting that the expansive vernacular that you explained how the violin works in these settings. I remember seeing Regina Carter for the first time.
oh man, yeah.
Right? I saw her at the Kansas City Jazz Fest this was before the pandemic, but I hadn't really seen it. And I was just reading a Billy Collins poem out of one of his new books, and he was
Okay.
talking about the jazz violin, and he'd went to Amsterdam and had to see the windowsill that Chet Baker fell out of, and just wove the whole jazz violin into his poem, and it was fascinating the way he did it.
Huh.
And but anyway, it's like I never saw the jazz violin in person until Regina did it. And that's a pretty high mountain that she's on doing it. And it just
She's the
opened me
great
up.
man. She's the goat, I
Yeah.
mean, she's really, really, her sound is amazing. Her thought is amazing. The quality of her expression is amazing. Yeah, she's the best.
Yeah.
Um, Huge inspiration. Yeah.
So I got to know, what was the first live jazz show that you saw that blew you away?
Well, so see, Duluth, Minnesota is not a large place. It's like a hundred
Right.
thousand people, a little bit less. There were more. It was a big steel town in the 70s that shut down, that changed it. It was a big shipping town in the early 20th century. It actually had its population boom in like 1920, and
Yeah.
then it's been slowly declining since then. It's rediscovered itself as a hub of tourism. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's built on a hill like San Francisco or Valparaiso in Chile. You crest the hill and you see Lake Superior stretching out way farther than the horizon. That lake goes 600 miles across, and the city's stretched out along the hill. It's this beautiful place. And the art scene is small but good.
Yeah,
And I think I was 14 when Midwestern violinist named Randy Sabine came through. And he's from Wisconsin. Originally, he's from North Carolina, but he was living in Hayward, Wisconsin at the time. And I think he was. It may have even been my dad that brought him to do some clinics at the high schools and organized his visit. And he came and did like an improvisation clinic in my high school and an improvisation clinic in another local high school. And those were cool. But what I really remember was that he played at Amazing Grace Bakery and Cafe. Um, one of the nights that he was in town, and we went down to see the show. I think I was either 13 or 14. And, his drummer was Clyde Stubblefield,
yeah.
famous, just man, wonderful, wonderful drummer. And his bass player was this guy, Jeff Eccles from Madison, Wisconsin, who really had a wonderful sound. And the show blew me away. They played like, the Beatles' Lady Madonna, and they played like, Gershwin's Summertime, and they played some, real classics. And I remember after the show, I went up to him and I was talking. I was like, I had no idea that's what you meant when you were doing that clinic, that this is what you meant, that you guys would get up on stage and you'd talk to each other on your instruments for a whole show and express all this joy. And he was so tickled that I got it that he just went and got a whole stack of his CDs and gave me like I think nine or 10 CDs in a
Wow.
big pile, just handed them to me and he's like, listen to these, kid. And so I took them home and I did listen to them. So that's the first jazz show that I remember.
Cool.
But the next one that jumps out is when I was going to Berkeley. Um, and it probably wasn't the first show that I caught when I was out there, but there's a club Regatta Bar in Cambridge, Mass, and Joe Lovano Trio was playing with Buster Williams and Idris Muhammad,
Yeah,
and that exploded my mind.
yeah,
I had no idea. I had no idea people could be that um clear in their thoughts, talking about something so spiritual, so intellectual, but so far removed from the everyday.
yeah,
People were shouting out from the audience lines that they like. It was a great listening culture there at the time that people would hear something they liked and they'd yeah, or like, I'll get the barbecue sauce or whatever it was.
yeah,
You know, um, but they were in it. They were playing so beautifully, and I didn't even know that was possible,
yeah.
really. And so that show also really stands out. I mean, I heard Kenny Garrett play with
Wow.
his quartet in that Nat Reeves and Jeff Tain Watts, I believe, uh, Kenny Kirkland. I mean, my gosh, that was a great time.
That's a great list. So, what do you like the best about being a professional musician? What gets you up every day? What motivates you?
Um, Thanks for that question too. I appreciate it. Man, well, joining a string quartet, I joined Ethel back in 2011, 2012. I joined Ethel in 2012, and I very quickly realized uh, I very quickly realized that I was in the middle of a very large pack, that there were a lot of great composers and a lot of great violinists who were playing this music. And around that time, coming from a jazz background, it was instilled in me very early that I should find a unique approach to music. I should find something that I felt like that it expressed who I was and expressed my thoughts, and that I had some degree of, I don't want to say ownership because it's not like you own it. It comes through you, it comes to you and through you, but you feel that it's very strongly tied to your personality. And so I felt like there was I should look for something individual. And coming through the string quartet and composition world, um, I really, I can't say that I got humble really fast, but I realized how many people were doing work that I admired in ways that I had not previously imagined possible. And so beginning then, I kind of started a quest for something that no one else was doing in the world of composition. And I've been working on it for the last 7 years. It's a project that I call Nested Notation, and it involves, both musical notation and written language, but it also involves a software that I've been designing with a group of software designers who are based in Vietnam. And the general idea is that everybody's playing music off of iPads these days, and so we all take a picture of the same QR code and go to the same link, and our music says the same thing. And if anybody in the band decides to touch a link in the music and move to the next section, the next chord, the next place, or whatever, everybody's screens all change together. And so I've been working on this tool for the last 7 years to combine some of the elements of music notation, which is a very efficient way of getting ideas across. If you want to say, you can write it down, you can put it on a line, and people can see it. And if they've had experience with it before, they can play it, right?
Yeah.
But the trick is people get lost. And so you need a conductor. You get a group of 10 people together and they're seeing music they haven't seen before and they haven't rehearsed any of this music or whatever. And, it becomes a question of, well, who's where? How do we know where we are?
Yep.
And the idea with this software is, well, people can only see one phrase at a time. They can only see a couple of chords at a time. And so you're just playing what's in front of you. And as soon as anybody moves on, everybody moves on.
Yep.
And so I've been working on this idea to combine, the sort of individualized aspect of music composition, like I'm writing a piece, I want you to learn my piece, let's play this thing, with a highly collectivist idea of, well, no one's going to get lost. We don't need a conductor. It's not a hierarchical situation. Anybody who wants to can move us along to the next phrase. And so that's been very challenging. It involves a lot of tools that are not typically musician tools, in terms of software design, in terms of sculpting the notation and all this kind of stuff. But it also involves a lot of the values that, I've been carrying since being very young as a young player, as a young jazz player, as a young classical player, of, valuing the communal experience of playing music together. And then also the beauty of being able to write something down
Yeah.
and hear it played back. You know, the it's gorgeous that we have recorded music. I mean, one of the beautiful things about jazz is that it seems to have evolved almost simultaneously with the recording industry. We don't know what was happening back before King Oliver. Stuff was happening
Yeah.
in New Orleans at the time, but we don't know necessarily what it was. We can play Scott Joplin rags and stuff like that because that was written down. And so there's this watershed that happens when we can actually listen to Louis Armstrong play, the hot fives and hot sevens. Um, that doesn't erase the beauty of notation, of being able to write down an idea and share it with somebody and talk about it as something that's separate from both of you. And so I'm a real strong proponent of reading and writing music, not as a necessity for playing good music, but as a tool to talk to one another efficiently
Yep.
about what it is we want to do, what it is we want to say, the kinds of pieces that we want to explore and make our own. Um, and so that's been a really fun thing. And so my current project, and it's going to take me well into the future, and hopefully I find the kind of resonance that will make it feel like a good set of sacrifices over the years. But it's been a real adventure into music notation. How can we change it? What are some options that are available to us to make it less prohibitive, less skill driven, invite people in who aren't necessarily as good at their instruments as master players. And then also use some of the tools that are just around us all the time, um, that we can't do anything about. Like the internet is here,
Yep.
mobile technology is here. People have a computer in their pocket every day, all day. Let's use that as a musical tool to bring us together and and enjoy that together. And so that's
Absolutely.
my personal project and my personal mission. That feels very individual. I don't feel like there are a lot of people doing that in the world of classical composition right now.
Yeah, no, I dig it. I dig it. Speaking of bringing people together, the Monk Suite, March 13th, 2025, with Maestro Ron Carter at Carnegie Hall. If anyone wants to get involved, they want any more information, Kip, how do they do that? Where's the best place to go?
EthelCentral.org.
Okay.
Yeah, or the Carnegie Hall website. You can get tickets both places. We would love to see you there. It's going to be a wonderful show. Maestro Carter makes a swing like no string quartet has ever swung before. And the way he plays Bach's Brandenburg Concerto is really not to be missed.
Yeah, right
Um,
on. Well, I'm going to make sure to get all of that in the show notes. Kip, it was wonderful to meet you. Thank you for your story, for your time. Have a wonderful show.
oh, Joe, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate the interview, and I just love what you're doing. Thanks for staying on the beat for us.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Thank you.